done. So here's what I know about the listing presentation. There's one thing having the visuals for the presentation. The second is knowing the words, the dialogues that go with with that presentation. So what's going to happen with my presentation is I've got it in PowerPoint format for you guys. And the reason why it's in PowerPoint is just because it's as easy to edit as a Word document. Literally, you can take my logo off, stick your logo on, edit it, tweak it to suit yourself. And obviously, the reason why we're going to record it, if there's any specific dialogue that I'm using that you like, you can go back and replay the video. So, two things. I'm going to share my screen with you now. 2 seconds, guys. I've just got to figure out where's my screen share. Here we go. Desktop. Yeah. Okay. So you guys should be seeing my screen as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, we're in business. All right. So let's kick it off officially. So this is, I guess, going to be a similar sort of document to what you were referring to, Lee's one. Now, if you were to say, well, we can use that. That is in Jigglar, ready for you guys to edit, manipulate, change, sort of effective immediately. You could access that by the finish of this meeting today. So that's the first thing. Now, that's one of my visual aids I take you with me, and let me explain how I use this. And this is sort of my opener. Can I just get an understanding of how you guys present? And let me ask, and what I mean by that, let me ask the question. Do you guys do like a one-hit presentation, or are you doing a two-hit presentation? E.g., do you do it? Do you go to the property, inspect the property, do the tour, walk around, then sit down and then do the presentation, or do you do the tour, say, right, we need to come back and then reappoint for another time? Just give me an understanding of how you guys do it.
Normally, we go in for the kill.
One hit?
One hit.
Yeah.
Everyone, Renee, one hit?
One hit.
Leanne?
One hit.
Great. Okay, me too. Now, there's no right or wrong. Like, for me, I think it's like, I think to myself, well, why can't you know the price of my property after you've done the tour? That's your job. But again, there's no right or wrong. Like, I've seen agents that are writing in excess of $4 million to two-hit presentation, two-hit presentations. So I think to myself, well, there's more than one way that leads to Rome, obviously. But I'm glad you guys do one hit, because that's sort of my preference, and I guess that's what we've all been trained to do. So, and just so I get the process right as well, because even in one hit, some people will sit down first, have like a really long conversation and build rapport, and then do the tour, then sort of finish off with the nuts and bolts. Now, that's not what I do. Typically, what I do is walk in, do the tour first, then sit down and do the presentation. Is that how you guys do it as well, or?
Yeah.
Majority of the time.
Yeah.
That's my preference, but sometimes if I kind of get the feeling of they're not, then I'll sit, but I try not to sit for too long, because I think if you sit for too long, to then tour, to then try to sit again is too hard to get them back to sit and talk.
Yeah, I agree. So, and this is just, what I'm about to share are just like the real little intricacies to start with. For me, I always will try and determine if somebody's sort of, what I call sort of someone that's formal or informal. That's always the first thing I look at. Okay, are you formal or are you informal? E.g., am I going to be doing this presentation in an informal setting in the lounge room, or are you more of a formal sort of proper person? And we need to, do this at the dining room table, because that's where, when you're formal, that's where all the big decisions get made, around the dining room table. So that's, for the first thing for me, is trying to ascertain what sort of person you are. So where are we actually going to do the presentation, and ultimately where you're going to be most comfortable. After I sort of figure that out, just one of the, and these are just little one, like not even 1%ers, half percenters. The first thing I'll always do is, you've all got like a listing kit, sort of a listing satchel.
Yep. So we've just again started to prepare that new. So we've just started using as a pre-listing that goes to the clients first.
Yep.
It presents itself to get it there first, or it will go with you at that time. Is the seller's booklet that First National has.
Yep.
We have those, and then as our model Jenna is showing, we then do the new one that was produced by Neo, which is the complete selling plan page, the 3-page,
which is great.
Yeah, so we send that, well, we try to use that as the pre-listing, so it goes to them, so they've got a concept of what we're going to talk. And the reason we went with Lee's structure, but looking at yours, it's quite similar as well. They're sort of structured the same, is that when they look through that one, that 3-page, which sort of gives them an indication of everything about what we're going to discuss, it blends nicely together. So then on the back, it's just got the agent and some testimonials. Yeah,
and I do recall, but that wasn't what I was asking. What I was asking, everybody has sort of like a listing, like this is not mine, but that's an example, like a sort of carry case sort of folder thing that you keep all your stuff in.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone, the reason why I asked that, you go, okay, what's this got to do with anything? The reason why I asked that is, you know, the reason why I carry one of them in as well is because that's, as soon as I figure out, are you informal or formal? Like, am I sitting in the lounge room or sitting at the dining room table? First thing I want to do is put that, whatever, you know, the thing that you carry in, that's where I'm going to put it down sort of automatically, because then that gives us an anchor point to come back to. So that's sort of just something really little that I do sort of before the presentation. Here's the challenge, right? And this is the challenge that we all face. And that is, as soon as you do the tour of a property, and this is the challenge of doing the tour first. As soon as you do the tour of the property, the first thing people want to know is, how much do you charge me? How much are you going to charge me? And how much do you think my house is worth? True?
True.
So, and this is the danger, because, you know, this is sort of like a moment of truth. You've done the tour, you've looked around, and they straight up sort of say to you, they straight up say to you, hey, what do you think my house is worth? What do you think I can get for it? P.S. What do you think? What's your commission? You tell them those two things, and then all of a sudden, sort of show's over, and that's a wrap. So one of the dialogues that I like to use, sort of really quick after I've done the tour, I'll say something like this. And this is more of a scripts and dialogues thing than a visual aid thing. But one of the first things I'm going to say, as soon as we've done the tour, you're going to sort of look at me as the vendor or as the client and sort of say, well, what do you think my house is worth? What are you going to charge me? And I'll straight away say, look, do you mind if we have a quick chat? There's a couple of things that you probably want to know. And they say, sure. I'd say, look, you probably want to know what I think your property's worth. They say, sure do. I'd say, you probably want to know what we charge. And they say, exactly. So what I'm doing by saying this is sort of being almost an exact opposite to what most agents do. Because what most agents do is try and dance around that until the very end. You know, we want to talk about why you should choose us and how we're better. And we're really trying to avoid what do we think it's worth and what's our commission until the end. And it's not to say that I don't talk about those things right at the end, like everybody else, but I'll just sort of get the elephant, address the elephant in the room and say, look, now that we've done the tour, there's probably two things that you want to know. How much we think the property's worth and how much we're going to charge. Is that right? And they say yes. And the reason why I do that is because it's a breath of fresh air. Because while everybody else is sort of dancing around, they're dancing around and trying to, you know, hide those two topics. I'm the one that's become, like, you know, straight between the eyes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'll say, look, we've done the tour. There's probably two things you want to know. What am I going to charge and how much I think the property's worth? And they say, sure. I'd say, well, look, do you mind if we take a seat and we can discuss those two things with you? And they say, that's fantastic. I say, look, it's probably going to take 20 to 25 minutes if that's okay. They say, sure, no problems. I'd say, and then this is the follow-on. I'll always say something like this. Also, is it okay while we were discussing those two things, is it also okay to discuss how we're going to market the property and how we attract a premium buyer? They say, sure. And I'm saying, is it also okay if we can sort of show you how we're going to negotiate and get a premium for your property? and they say no problems. So realistically, when we're talking about marketing, negotiating, price and commission, we're now just talking about a listing presentation. True or false?
True.
Because they're the four things you talk about. Why you should choose me, why I can get you a better price, how we're going to take it to market, what we charge, what we think we should market it at, and what the strategy looks like. So that's how I'll always say it. So I'll just say, look, now that we've done the tour, there's probably two things you want to know. What am I going to charge and what do I think it's worth? If it's okay, let's take a seat and I'm happy to discuss that with you now. Should take 20, 25 minutes. Great. Also, while we're there, let's discuss how we're going to negotiate on your behalf and also how we're going to market your property to attract a premium buyer. Soon as I say that, now what's happening is, right, you've actually got permission to do a full-blown listing presentation, and you've sort of specced out what the agenda is going to be. So before I actually get into what I would say is the nuts and bolts of the presentation, the first thing I'm going to do is I'll open this this document or this triple page, and I'll say, and this is sort of like, so step one, figure out where I'm going to do the presentation. Step two, sort of have that opening dialogue after the tour. Then step three, for me, this is sort of a pod, which is like a point of difference sort of statement. And I'll say this to somebody. And now you've got something similar to this. And I'll just say this. I'd say, let's just say you're my vendor, Nathan. I'll say something like this. Look, Nathan, what I'd like to go through with you right now is the actual blueprint to selling your house. And this is what I'd say. I'd say, look, regardless if you choose me or you choose somebody else, these are going to be the steps that the agent is going to follow. What most agents are going to do at this point is just talk about them and why you should choose them. Let's just dial that back for a second and let's just focus on what are the actual steps to getting your property sold, irrespective if it's through me or through someone else. And the reason why I like to go through this with you now is you might be 2 weeks, down the track, maybe listed with me or maybe listed with somebody else. And you might want to know exactly where you're up to. All you've got to do is get this guide, and this is for you, by the way. So what I've done is the law of reciprocity. The first thing I've done is saying this is for you, so I've given you something. And I say, so I just want you to hang on to this, irrespective if you're listed with me or you're listed with somebody else. This is going to be a helpful guide that sort of guides you through the maze of selling. Today is green where we start, and obviously red is sort of when we stop. And then literally I just read through it with them. And the reason why I say to them, regardless if you list with me or you list with somebody else, is I'll say, because all the other agents at this point will start talking about them and why you should choose them. All I really want to help you with is what are the steps to selling real estate. So what I'm trying to do, even before I do my why you should choose me part, is I'm different. And I'm not trying to be pushy, and I'm not trying to be desperate saying, regardless if you choose me or you choose somebody else, this is going to be a helpful guide. So all I'm trying to do at this point is better educate you on the process of selling. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, here's the thing, right? Out of explaining for a second, for me to actually explain this to you takes probably 2 to 3 times longer than it actually takes in real life, because in real life, I'm just doing it. I'm not doing it, then stopping and then explaining why I'm doing it, if that makes any sense. Sort of like you're getting the director's cut version, if you will, sort of, like this is what I do and this is why I do it. Where normally when this is what we do, that dialogue is 30 seconds. So I'd say, and then I just sort of break it down. I'd say, look, there's 2 things that are going to happen before we go to market. Thing number 1, there's the preparation phase. So as the agent, this is what the agent should be doing down, and that's the things down the bottom. But the agent should be preparing the method of sale, getting photography sessions right, writing up the ads and doing all the creative, submitting to you for proof. We should be getting all your contracts and paperwork in order. We should be starting to notify buyers of a hot property that matches their criteria. While we're doing that, you're decluttering, you're giving the property some touch up on paint if it needs it, redoing gardens, getting ready for the photography session, and getting ready for the first open house. So that's all the things that are going to happen before we get the contract of sale. Once we get the contract of sale, next thing that's going to happen is We're going to do a big email out to our database. We're going to install the signboard. We're going to put it on all the websites. We're going to put it in the press, magazine or paper. We're going to create property brochures and put your open house folder together. We're going to put it in the window. We're going to do 1,000 just listed drops throughout the area. We're going to invite people to the open. We're going to negotiate and sell your house. So I'd say regardless, these are the steps every agent's going to sort of follow. If you're stuck or you want to know what's going on, just look at this document and this is where it will tell you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, cool. So that's thing number one. All right. So that's I guess that's sort of, what would I say, the preamble, if you will. So these are the steps. This is not about me. This is just about you. Then at the end of this, I'll just say, if you're my vendor, Nathan, I'll just say, Nathan, hang on to this. You can keep that. That one's for you. So everybody understands the law of reciprocity, or anyone heard that saying before?
Yeah. Yep.
Or reciprocity in general, sort of, you give somebody something. The law of reciprocity is that they want to do something nice, sort of back for you. So that's just one of my little things. Next, and this is where it sort of gets interesting. My listing presentation itself has been, how can I say it? There's been an evolution over probably a 17-year period. And the way I do a listing presentation today, now I'll be honest, my listing presentation used to be digital. So it used to be on an iPad, when iPads, were the in thing. And then I sort of, it wasn't interactive enough. And what I mean is, it was sort of like I couldn't write on it. I couldn't leave it with you. It sort of was a disengagement between you and I, so to speak. So what I went and did was went old school and still just went back to paper. I like paper for the simple fact, if I want to write on something or do something, we can. But let me explain. My listing presentation itself, the front page, the front page is different every time. So what I'll do, and as I said, I'll give you my listing presentation template. I'll send it to you after today. But one of the things that you're going to notice about my listing presentation template is the front page I edit every time. So before I go out to any listing presentation, I'll have the person's name on it and I'll have their address on it. So when I sort of go to the property, right, and let's just say, that my black book's the listing presentation, I sort of put it on the table, and it automatically has the person's name and address on it. And all that really means is that I've taken the time to put something together for you. This isn't a generic thing. This is, tailor-made to you. Does that make sense? Look, regardless, all the other pages subsequently might be exactly the same, but you think about it, right? And honestly, like if an agent come to your house and then they put down a nice bound document and it has your name on the front cover, has your address on the front cover, what do you automatically think?
It's personalised for you.
Yeah, it's like these guys, it's personalised for me. And this person has taken the time out to put something together specific for me. And that's the goal. Now, the reality of it is, or the truth of it is, the front page gets changed every time, but everything behind that is the same, right? Literally I'll go to a listing presentation, take the first page out, slide the new first page in, but continually, make sure that the front page is always customized to those people, which is important, right? Well, I think so anyway. Then I'll just say this. There's 4 things that you'll want to cover, which we've already said. How do we select an agent, the fees, the price, the marketing, etc. So let's get into it. Then all I'll say to somebody, and okay, I'll give you an example. With a newspaper, in the newspaper every day, how do they sell newspapers every day? Headlines. Is that you that said that, Nathan? Yeah, it's headlines. Would everyone agree with that? Like on the front page of the paper every single day, there's a headline, big attention-grabbing headline. So, my point on sharing this with you is, from a consumer's point of view, most people are probably still thinking, what's he going to charge me? And what's my property worth? I don't want them to be thinking that for the whole presentation. What I want to try and do now is give you a big headline. And the headline is more about what's he going to cost versus how can they help me. So here's the headline. Ready? And this sort of gets them away from just, looking at agents as a commodity, but now how can the right agent help me? So I'll just say this. Did you know the difference between having an average agent work for you and having the right agent work for you can be as much as, and depends on your area, you change it, but, having the right agent work for you can get you as much as an extra $30 or $40 or $50,000, whatever it is. If it's a $600,000 house, it's probably an extra $30,000. If it's a $1 million house, it's probably an extra $50,000. If it's a $300,000 house or $300,000 unit, it's probably an extra $15,000. But I'll just say, look, having the right agent work for you can be the difference in getting an extra $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I guess, the question is, do you want me to show you how we get you that extra money? And they all say,
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, like, of course, like, why else are you here? But so now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shift the focus from what are they going to charge me and what are they going to cost me to how are they going to help me. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's sort of how I do it. Then we just talk about the sales team. Now here's the beautiful thing. I really want you guys to pay close attention to what I'm about to share with you. Because in your listing, now, here's what I know, and here's what I've picked up from our first session together. You're going in against the McGraths, the Bells, the agencies that have got bigger teams than you. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, I want to be able to give you a tool or tools to be able to combat that. And I don't care if this is for property management. I don't care if this is for sales. This is going to be beneficial, right? So let's be clear. Let's discuss what the agency, McGrath, Bell, let's discuss what they say. When they go into a listing presentation, what are some of the things that they say?
Oh.
When we're talking about teams, so they're going to talk about why you should use us. They're going to talk about size of agency, true or false?
True.
Yeah.
They're going to talk about we're a big agency, we sell more properties.
True.
They're going to talk about how many salespeople they have
Yep.
in their office, true?
True.
We've got access to more buyers.
Yep.
That's typical of big agency mentality, right? We've got access to more buyers. We've got more salespeople working on the property for you. Now, here's what I also know about big agencies. Big agencies also have a lot more turnover.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Definitely.
The bigger the agency, typically you have higher turnover. So here's what I know, irrespective of the brand, big agencies typically just have higher turnover. Also, big agencies, it's actually like a lot of big agencies are like a movie set. Like they look good on glossy on the outside, but that's just for show, because typically the bigger the agency, normally the culture is actually not as good, because typically in bigger agencies, you've got more personality clashes. In a little team like yours, or not in just like yours, but any smaller teams, typically you have more synergy within the sales team because you're spending more time together, less personality clashes. So I know in big agencies, you're going to have personality clashes, bigger egos sort of competing with each other, and you don't actually have a team. Typically what you have in big agencies is a group of people sort of working side by side in cubicles next to each other, but that's not a team. That's just a group of individuals working side by side. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me explain why that's important. So this is what I know. And this is how we're going to explain it, because in our area, we didn't have the biggest office. We had sort of a normal average size office. Wasn't the smallest, but it wasn't the largest office in the area. We had star partners, and we had the professionals that both had 3 offices, in a central location to us. So I know they're going to say more window display, more shop front, more salespeople, more buyers. But this is how I combat it. Ready? I'll say something like this. Look, it's interesting. Most of the bigger teams in the area, the first thing that they're going to say is they've got access to more buyers, that they've got a bigger sales team working for you. But I'd say ultimately both of those two things are a myth. Let me explain why. So I'm not going to name any agencies at this point, but I'm just going to sort of debunk what these other agents are going to say. And I'll say, it's interesting. So I'll say, they've got access to more buyers. But here's the reality. When a buyer goes out and looks for a property, they jump on, the web portals like realestate.com and Domain. And when buyers are looking on those portals, all the properties are next to each other. So irrespective if you have the property or we have the property or they have the property, they will find it. It's not that, buyers don't just buy through one agency. Buyers buy through whoever's got the property. So them saying they've got access to more buyers or them having more agents on the ground is a benefit. Realistically, it's not, because buyers don't buy from an agent. Buyers buy through whoever has the property that they like at the time. Now, by the way, would you guys agree with that? Buyers don't just buy. Like, I've never had a buyer say, look, Aaron, I'm only ever going to buy through you. They will buy the property that they like. And if you've got it, great. But if you don't have it, they'll still buy it through somebody else. True or false?
Yeah,
True.
Right? So I'll just say something like that. And then I'll just drill down and I'll say, it's interesting. Because the agencies with the big teams will say, talk about their team. But realistically, in big teams, they're actually not big teams. All they are is individuals in cubicles working next to each other. And let me explain. Like, if you list with Agent A and it's Agent A's day off or Agent A is busy and you ring up or the buyer rings up, that buyer won't be able to get the service because, Agent B will just say, look, I'm not handling that property. You're going to have to wait for Agent A. And in a lot of the big agencies, they're actually not allowed to sell each other's properties. Only the agent that lists it is allowed to sell it. In our office, anyone that lists the property is allowed to sell it. So, if I'm on a day off and you want to know about it, Renee will know about it, or Leanne will know about it, or Nathan or Ben, or someone will know about it. So, and I'll say in our office, we actually encourage other salespeople showing the property as well, because Renee might have a buyer that he really knows well and has rapport with. And in our team environment, Renee's actually allowed to show that property because Renee might have the rapport or the ability to get an extra 5 or 10 or 15 or even 20 or $30,000. In a lot of the other offices, Agent A isn't allowed to show Agent B's property because, they're independent contractors. And what that means is that the buyer then has to go through with an agent that doesn't necessarily mean they can't see it. It just means that they can't see it with an agent that they know or like, which then the rapport isn't there. So then the ability to influence the buyer's sale price isn't there either. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
And then these are the last 2 things I'm going to talk about that are really going to blow the big team out of the water. I would say, the thing that's interesting with big team is they always have a lot of fresh faces. Like, I just see them in the newspaper and the magazines, and they just constantly seem to be turning over staff. And what happens with big team is, because it's sort of like it's a sink or swim sort of mentality, there is always people practicing. There's always somebody practicing. And I don't begrudge anybody for learning or practicing. I just probably wouldn't want them practicing on
Your property.
my property. In our office, we've got Renee, veteran, Nathan, veteran, Leanne, veteran. And then, Ben, how long was it, am I hallucinating? Was it 9 months or 12 months? How long was it that you've been with the team?
9 months.
How much?
9 months.
No, I thought it was even, I remember 9 or 12. and it's 9 months. So let's just say you're doing the presentation, Ben. You then just say, look, and here's the team. Ready? And you just say everybody else's experience and not your own. Now, let's just say with Ben's part of Leanne's team. So any like everybody else that's presenting that, Ben is part of Leanne's team. Anyway, so that's how I'll sort of explain it. So I don't begrudge anybody from learning. I just don't want them learning on your biggest asset. And you know what everybody says? Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want them. And then the last thing that I'll do here, just remember this dialogue. All it is a restaurant analogy. Now, so let me give you an example of how our office works. Our office works like a traditional restaurant. There's somebody that seats you. There's somebody that greets you. There's somebody that cooks your meals. There's somebody that washes up. And it runs like a traditional restaurant where you have a pleasurable experience. With these other big teams, the person that greets you is the same person that seats you, is the same person that takes your meals orders, is the same person that cooks for you, and is the same person that tidies up. I'd say if you had one person in a restaurant that did everything, what would that restaurant experience look like? And I would say it's absolute chaos. I'd say, and that's how the traditional or how the big agencies run. They run like one person does everything. I'd say, and then times it by 10. And now they've got 10 people in the restaurant. And now they've got to seat and greet and cook for everybody. So you're up to your entrees while somebody's walking in the door, then somebody needs a drink. I'd say, they try and be everything to everybody and it ends up being nothing to nobody. So that's how I sort of explain the benefit of going with a more boutique agency. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's some good analogies that you can use and some good metaphors there around us versus them. Big teams aren't teams, they're just people in cubicles. It's, a traditional restaurant versus, all of that sort of stuff, access to buyers. So go back because there is some gold there. And I promise you this, right? If we get this done right that it takes nowhere near as much time to explain it in real life. In real life, that is 3 to 4 minutes sort of tops. But the reality is you get that right and all of a sudden the gloss of the bigger agencies isn't so glossy because you've now put a comparable argument to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, definitely keep that in mind. Now, here's the thing. The next thing is just as important. And I'll ask this question, in your listing presentations, do you have case study?
No.
Let me explain. For me, honestly, now, here's the thing about big agency, right? Regardless of who the big agency is. Here's the thing about big agency. Big agency work because they use momentum. They use profile. And the first thing you say when you're a big agency, we just sold the house around the corner from you. We just sold the house down the road from you. We just sold this one. We just sold that one. Is that true?
Yes.
Realistically, all that is case study. They're just saying, well, we sold this, so all the buyers from that one, we can show this one. Now, here's what I know. Case study doesn't necessarily have to be on the 5 most recent sales, but you can have case study. And the properties can be a couple of months old. But the way that instead of using case study on activity, you're using case studies on points of difference. Let me explain. When they're big agencies sort of saying, we sold this one, we sold that one, they're just using case study on volume, right? This is why you should choose us because we sold this, we sold that. But here's how you use case study. You might not have the volume of case study, but you will have scenario. Let me explain. I've got 4 scenarios here. So the first case study is of a property that we sold to the database. So that's an example of our selling system. So this one sold to the database. The vendor wanted an off-market sale. Here's how we did it. We took it to the market. We emailed it. We SMS'd it. We retracked our buyers, etc. So that's an example of case study of how we used our database to make a sale. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Case study 1. Case study 2. Here's how we run a really good open house, and this is how we have this is how we treated a multiple office scenario where we got a house that was on the market for $429, and here's how we actually sold it for $470. Let me explain how we did it. And that was where we're talking about, you know, doing a property launch. I don't know if you do property launch, but I guess property launch is pretty simple. Nobody's allowed to see the property before the first Saturday. So for the first week, all we do is market your property online, offline, digitally, you know, email, text message, phone call, print, letterbox drop, and then we get everybody at your property on the first Saturday, where we might have 10, 15, 20, 30 people. We have a multiple office scenario and we increase the price. So we explain that as a scenario in a case study. Right? Next ones, you know, how we negotiated the full price, and then again and again. So it's just different case studies of different scenarios of how we sold. So you know, so for argument's sake, you would, if you're doing auction, you would have a case study of a result that you sold above reserve at auction. You know, if you're doing range, how you got to the top end of the range. So just include some case studies, because if you're going through and talking about case studies of some positive results, you know what it does? Give them confidence to say, well, we should go, you know, we can go with you too because these other people have gone with you. So therefore, we can also go with you because it's safe, because other people have also done that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So please just use some case study. Like I was on a website recently, but when I say recently, as recent as last night. You know, it was interesting. It was like a sales web page. It was on a sales web page, and here was the interesting thing about it. When I was on it, a little notification in the bottom left-hand corner come up, and it was just, you know, like you get like a Facebook pop-up notification on your thing, and then it goes away. And it said, it like had the person's name, like Nathan, just purchased this 7 minutes ago. Then it went away, and then 30 seconds later, Renee just purchased this. Yeah, and it said Renee from Werribee or Renee from Fig Tree just purchased this 30 minutes ago. Does that make? And I was looking at it and I was thinking, how clever is that? Because that website's giving me confidence that other people are already purchasing. So therefore, it's also okay for me to purchase. However, I still didn't purchase it. But I really like the fact that that's what they were doing. So here's what I know. We can definitely use case study because it sort of gives that security and safety that other people are doing it. So therefore, it's also okay for me to do it. So let's just use that. Now we talk about marketing, right? Now here's what I know about marketing. I'll say something like this to somebody. There's two types of marketing in my belief. There's the first one which and these are the specific dialogues. I'll talk about hope marketing versus strategic marketing. I really want you guys to remember those two words, because this is going to be a point of difference between you and other agents soon enough. I'll say to somebody, look, there's two types of marketing an agent can do. The first type of marketing is hope marketing. The second type of marketing is strategic marketing. Let me explain why we do both. Now, let me explain, you know, hope marketing. And I'll say hope marketing is typically the traditional marketing. You know, where an agent puts it in a magazine, they put it in the newspaper, they stick it on the internet, and after they do all those things, they hope that a buyer will call. Is that true, by the way?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Like we put a sign on it, we stick it in the magazine, we put it in the internet, we do all these things, and then we say, shit, I hope somebody shows up. So I'll say there's two types of marketing. There's hope marketing versus strategic marketing. And I'll explain the difference. And so I'll go through hope marketing. We'll put the signs on your property. you know, we do all these things. So we talk about magazine, we talk about newspaper. Then I'll show this slide. People have a laugh about this because everybody can relate to this at some level, where you bought something in the ad and it looks absolutely brilliant, and then in real life you get it out of the wrapper and it looks like shit. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because, and now this has happened to you. Tell me if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. You've got beautiful marketing photos on a property, right? You've got beautiful marketing photos on a property, and you market the property, buyers show up, buyers get to the house and they say, this isn't the same house as what I saw in the photos. The photos look way better than the house. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Or they say it looks smaller or whatever. So this is where I have this conversation about reality versus perception. And I'll say, look, we need to make sure that the perception of your property, what we're going to market to the audience, and the reality are in line. Because here's what I know. We're going to have professional photographers come through, and they're going to photograph this property like you wouldn't believe. They're going to make the rooms look massive. It's going to look unbelievable. But here's what I know. We need to make sure that when a buyer arrives to the property, that the perception of the property meets or the reality of the property meets the perception. So what I'm politely saying to people is, tidy up your shit, make sure your house looks terrific, as good as the photos are going to look. Otherwise, you know, people are going to be disappointed when they get here. So I'm just trying to politely say, let's make sure that the reality meets the perception. So I'm talking about making sure the gardens are done. You know, because you know as well as I do, you know, the photographers, you know, put in like, you know, if the frost has got, you know, winter frost has got the grass and it's not as green. You know that the photographers put an extra couple of layers of green on it. You know if there's clouds in the sky, they put in a bit more sun. You know they use wide lens angles and they do like 5 or 6 layers of photography to bring in the natural light, and you know that they do all that stuff to make the photo look better. So I'll just say, look, we've just got to make sure that your property actually meets the perception of the buyers. So when they get here, they say, wow, this is as good as the photo, if not better. So we just explain how we're going to do that, right? Then I just explain professional photography to them and just show them an example of a pro photographer versus a standard photographer, e.g. me. And then we just talk about the types of things that they're going to get, you know, in their marketing, right? So, you know, from brochures, floor plans, to what we take to open house. Now let me pause for a second. Now, Ben, I can't see you, so how are we going with this? Are you picking up some things as we go here, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely.
A few good things?
Yeah.
Good. Nathan, look, I know your experience, but is there some things here that we can add to your arsenal?
Absolutely.
Cool. Jenna, are the cogs turning for how we can adapt some of this for property management?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Just want to make sure. I can only see Nathan. I can't see anybody else. So
Sorry, we are all here.
Good. Yeah, as I said, like you guys could all be asleep for all I know at this point. So I just want to make sure I've still got you guys.
No, you still got us. We're all here.
Good. All right. So now this next part is I'm going to use some specific dialogue. So you know, some dialogue that I'm going to use. Obviously, I've already discussed. It's hope marketing versus strategic marketing. And shortly, I'm going to introduce what I call the proactive buyer versus the passive buyer. So I really want you to remember proactive versus passive, okay? Because Nathan, I promise you it's going to help you sell vendor paid advertising a lot easier.
We always get it.
I don't have a problem selling it.
We don't have any problem selling it. We just want them to pay their money up front now.
Yeah, gotcha. Well,
everybody around the table, probably bar Renee, who's just stepped out to go to the bathroom. I'm quite confident that everybody knows the advantage of getting VPA, and we all get it. We all get we all get pretty good money. We usually don't have a problem getting $2,500, $1,000 of VPA.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. It sounds like it's reasonably good money, but you know yourself. I mean, by the time we do a realestate.com and a couple
it doesn't go far.
It doesn't go too far, but we've made some changes in how we're doing things, so we're okay with it. Everybody gets it except for probably Renee. He's starting to get it, but I think he's always been in offices that have never really got it in the past. So
yeah.
But he's just stepped out to the bathroom.
No, that's cool. So, and it's interesting though, because, and I will come back to it in a second, but when I talk about proactive versus passive buyers to clients, and I'll say, look, the proactive buyers live on the internet. They've got the app on their phone, realestate.com and domain apps on their phone. They're reviewing everything. I say, and I'm off topic a little bit, but when I'm talking about proactive buyers versus passive buyers, I'll say for a very short window of time, the proactive buyer has more knowledge of the market than us as agents, because as agents, we're looking at our own properties, at First Nationals properties only. But the proactive buyer is looking at every single listing with every single agent. Is that true, by the way?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We know what we've got, but they're not just walking through our properties. They're walking through every property. They jump on realestate.com and domain alerts, and as new properties are coming on, they're getting alerted daily by the minute, and they're looking at everything. So I'll say, look, proactive buyers probably make up 80% of the market, but there's also passive buyers, and passive buyers make up probably 20% of the market. The difference between a proactive buyer and a passive buyer is very simple. Proactive buyers are on digital platforms. They're on realestate.com, they're on domain, they're on our email lists, and they're looking at every single property. So they know what is value and what isn't value. But the passive buyer is the buyer that lives in the newspaper. The passive buyer is the buyer that lives in the magazine. And the passive buyer is the person that is reading the paper on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and they see a property and they say, oh, that property's perfect. That's exactly what they've been looking for. Typically, the passive buyer is typically a little bit of an older age demographic. And typically, the passive buyer hasn't looked at 50 other properties to compare it to. As soon as they see the one they like, they go and buy it. And because they haven't looked at 20 other properties to compare it to, they're not worried about, is it value or is it not value? They're just buying because they like it. So typically the passive buyer is going to pay a premium on your property, where a lot of agents just want to reach that proactive buyer. It's our job to also reach the passive buyer, because even though they make up a smaller percent of the inquiry and sales, they probably make up a larger percent of record sale prices, in the area. So, it's our job and our obligation and our duty to reach the proactive buyers for you, but also to reach passive buyers. Can everyone use that dialogue, passive versus proactive?
Yeah, I think that's really good.
It's true though, guys. You think about it. Like those passive buyers, and I'm not being rude, but those passive buyers are clueless, right? They haven't looked at 50 houses. They just saw a nice house and they said, one day if that house ever comes up on the market, I'd buy that house, right? Those people will pay a premium because they're not in the market to look at 50 houses. They just want one or a particular street or a particular area. And typically, if they've got a bit of an older age demographic, they're not digital, they're looking still analog through papers. Typically, somebody that's a bit older, what does that also mean?
They got more money, generally.
Money. True?
Yeah, definitely.
They've got more money, like I'd say. So they're cash buyers or larger deposits on properties, which means they can afford to pay more. So that's how I explain digital versus print, passive buyer versus proactive buyer, right? But now here's the interesting thing, and this is sort of like a pod now, like a nice point of difference. So I'm showing a client what we take to open house on their behalf. So I know, and I know you guys do this, and I know a lot of agents do, but we use we use open houses as a listing tool, true? To try and find another potential seller?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but you know what's happened over the years? Agents are using open house as a listing tool more and more these days, right? Now, let me give you an example. And I'm going to role reverse this for a second. Let's just say you weren't in real estate. And let's just say you went into a car yard, right? So you went into a car yard, and as you went into the lot, the car yard lot, the guy or the salesperson greeted you, and they gave you a bottle of water with their face on it. And then they gave you a show bag with their face on it. And then you'd think, I'm not here to look at your face. I'm here to
look at cars.
Buy a car. True or false?
True.
But in real estate, it seems to be perfectly acceptable. And we use the open house as more of a profiling exercise than a selling exercise. Now, I'm not saying don't do that. Keep doing what you're doing. But what's happened is we've sort of made it from helping people buy experience as first to sort of as a secondary. So one thing that I'm going to say, as a point of difference, because I'm not big on that stuff, right? I never have been huge on profile marketing and opens. So this is what I'll say to somebody as me versus you or us versus them sort of scenario. I'll say, look, most people at open houses are going to use your open house as a platform to go and get more listings, and they make it all about them and less about you. And first thing people think is, I don't want that to be my open house, right? When I spell it out to them, I'd say, so every agent does an open house, but not all open houses are the same or created equal. So here's the thing. Again, these are very specific words that I'm going to use at this point. I'll say something like this. Here's what we know as a real estate agent. An informed buyer will make an informed decision. An uninformed buyer will make an uninformed decision. So I have one goal when I'm doing your open house, and that is very simple. The goal is to make sure any questions that a buyer asks me, I'm able to give them the answer on the spot. Does that make sense? So that's the first part. Then I'll say something like this. Most of the other agents are just going to use this as a profile and branding exercise to actually get more business. I'm actually using the open house to sell your property. And what I meant by an informed buyer will make an informed decision. The other agents are going to have banners about who they are. They're going to have water bottles and chuppa chups and really like it's going to be an exercise. But what happens when the buyer asks some very specific questions about your property? The agent can't answer it because they don't have that documentation on standby. So then they say to the client or to that potential buyer, I'll get back to you with that information. Here's what I know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. The magic leaves with the buyer when that buyer leaves your house. So I want to make sure that I can answer any question that buyer has of your property while I'm there. So this is why, yes, we still have some profiling information about who we are, but your open house is 90% about you and how we're going to help you get it sold. So this is what we take. We take brochures of your property. We take recent sales. So if somebody does try and submit an offer which is below what we think it's worth, we can show them the 5 most recent comparables. We take a contract of sale. We also have, I don't know about you guys, but a granny flat's big in your area at the moment.
They're starting to become. We manage a few, but yeah, they are starting to become.
Yeah, in our area, literally, you couldn't sell a property unless it had a granny flat. I'll say that again. In our area, you would struggle to sell a house unless you can actually put a granny flat on it. So the first thing people want, as soon as they come through one of our open houses, is front page of contract and sewer diagram. They're the first two things people want. So I'll say, look, we have contract of sale on display. We'll also have front page of contract and sewer diagram. Our area is big on investment. So we also take a rental letter because you know as well as I know that as soon as somebody's interested as an investment, what's the first thing that they've got to have?
Rental appraisal.
Rental appraisal letter. So I give it to them on the spot. We have a purchaser checklist. We have a purchaser checklist of how a first home buyer or how anybody actually buys a property. So we actually give them a process book on how they actually buy. We have an offer sheet, and we have a list of conveyances details. So that's what we actually take to our open house, right? Now, is there some things there that we take that you guys could also incorporate?
Yeah, we probably have most of those things there.
Cool.
We don't have cards on conveyances, but I think that's probably almost about the only thing.
You also don't carry the agency agreement stuff.
Yeah, and that's cool. So, and here's the funny thing, right? I'll say this to a buyer. I'll say this to a seller. I'll say, so here's the good news. Regardless of what any question a buyer asks of me, I'll be able to answer it on the spot. Now, here's what I know you're doing. Call it the same as me, right? In this scenario. But I'm going to ask a question. Are you explaining to your vendor that this is what you do?
Well, something that we do differently, Anne and I, is we carry brochures for every property that we have. So that's something we do explain to our vendors when we're having a meeting with them. We say, like, at every property we display your brochure just in case they're not interested in this property, that we can refer them straight on.
Yes.
So we've been doing a lot of referral work lately just by handing them a brochure and saying, well, Nathan's got this one open around the corner.
Yep. Cool. Okay. And I'm glad that you're doing it, because most people say we do open houses, but they very rarely get into the nitty gritty of it. So, now this is just an opinion, right? This isn't fact or anything. This is just my opinion. If I'm a consumer, there's two things that are most valuable to me in selecting my agent. The two things for me that are probably the most important things, and I'm talking from a consumer's point of view if I was going to select an agent. The first one would be how you run your open house, because everyone agrees that's where we sort of meet the buyers, and that's the first impression of your property to most buyers. So first one is how you conduct your open house, and the second one for me is how you negotiate my property. That'd be the two that I want to look at. If I was going to list my house today, I want to know how well you negotiate. Let me go back a step. Have you ever noticed this? Most people hire a real estate agent ever before they can actually they will hire a real estate agent ever before they know that agent can actually negotiate on their behalf. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
I find that a bit weird, because I think to myself, what's the most important thing the agent needs to be able to do? Negotiate. Would everyone agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah, we all, like, very rarely, well, okay, I'll be honest and say I've never had somebody ever in the history of ever say this to me. Aaron, before I list with you, can you show me how you negotiate on my behalf? No one's ever said that to me ever.
No.
And I find it fascinating, because if maybe because I'm in the industry, if I was selling a property, the first thing I would say to an agent is, how do you run your open houses and how do you negotiate on my behalf? They're the two things that are most important to me. Now,
it depends on your vendor's age, to be honest. I think it depends on your vendor's age as to what the process is of what's important to them.
Yep, correct. I agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of vendors that we probably miss business on go for agencies such as Bell and the agency per se. No comprehension whatsoever whether or not they can negotiate, but go for the fact that they have this whole prettiness of they just look good. It's a perception of what they look like, and it's a perception of, well, they sell a lot of houses. Doesn't really matter whether they're selling them for as much money as what somebody else is selling them for, but they sell a lot. So if they sell a lot, that's enough for them. They've got no comprehension about, well, how much are they selling them for versus how much we would sell them for. So I think it just depends on the vendor that you're sitting opposite.
Yep, agreed. And it is interesting. So one of the two things I'll always do, and what we're going to get up to, is I'll always do sort of a demonstration of value. So this is what I'll say. I'd say, look, so here's the thing. Every real estate agent is going to do an open house, but not all open houses are created equal. So that's roughly what I'm going to say. And again, I'm going to just bring it back to my main focus at your open house is that an informed buyer will make an informed decision. Any question a buyer asks me, we'll be able to have the answer to their question. So that's how I'm going to say it. Now, we're spending a lot of time on it, and it would have taken nowhere near this much time, in an actual presentation. Then we talk about, realestate.com and domains and features and highlights and You guys do, what do you do? Highlights or premieres or standards?
Highlight. We do highlight all,
Highlight or, yeah.
based on where our properties are generally located. You'll
Yep.
always still be on the first page.
Yeah, cool. So then you'll talk about that, right? You'll talk about, and this is all I will say around this. So you'll talk about highlights versus premium versus this versus that. And I'd say, look, and I think there was a stat, and I don't know how accurate these stats are. I always question stats, but this is what I still say. I'd say, look, I read a stat recently from realestate.com and Domain, and that is 70% of buyers look at both websites. But there's also 30% of buyers that will only look at one or the other. And I don't know the split between realestate.com and Domain, but let's just assume it's 50-50, and I don't think it is. But let's just assume it's 50-50. That means there's some agents out there that only advertise on realestate.com or Domain. They don't advertise on both. And if they don't advertise on both, they're getting 70% of the proactive buyers. And they're also probably missing out on maybe 15% of the proactive audience, because the buyers are only looking at realestate.com or Domain. We want to make sure we advertise in both. That's roughly how I'll say it. And then sort of click through, where else we All right, and then we talk about signboards. And do you guys do big signboard?
We only do signboard. We don't do call flute at all. It's
good. So, well, that's easy for you. And look, we do probably 90 big, 10 small. And this is how we get them to do it. I just say, look, do you want our company on your front lawn, or do you want your property advertised on your front lawn? That's just how I say it. So just a nice dialogue. The big board advertises your property. The small board advertises our company. Everybody always says, I want my company. I want our property. Great. Now, this is where you guys can have some fun. We talk about windows. We talk about where we're located. And obviously, you guys would be, the foot traffic that you guys currently have, you guys should be using as part of your big point of difference. Yeah?
Yeah. And we don't use it enough.
I think you should.
I know. We should.
Honestly, guys, I'm okay. I don't go to a million different agencies a year, but I do go to, I go to over 100. I see a lot of different agencies, and I got to be honest, you guys are in a pretty unique setup. Two things: how your office works, e.g., I think I just heard the key cutter cut a key. Was I right, or was I hallucinating?
Just a minute, yeah.
Yeah, I heard Mr. Minute cutting his keys just then. So I'm sitting here at my house, and I can hear the kids screaming in the background. My point is, you guys are in a pretty unique scenario because most people aren't in prime real estate location. Honestly, that's a selling tool for me. I'd say, okay, what's the feature? Feature is we get heaps of foot traffic. What's the benefit? Benefit is we get to meet passive buyers who weren't even in the market, but were walking past, saw the house, thought to themselves, maybe we should. How I was thinking about this, and there's one thing that I want to help you guys on. I'm out of listing presentation for a moment, but I'm talking about location. One thing I've been thinking about with you guys is, how do we leverage the front of your office better? How do we leverage that foot traffic that you've got? And I can see Nathan has done the genesis, like the starting point. You've got that pop-up banner, Nathan.
Yeah.
Up the front, I'd say, okay, that's the start. How else do we build on that? The thing for me is, you guys are in a prime area, absolutely prime position to run competitions from the front of your office. And I don't know, you might say no, we're not allowed, but I don't know the rules. But if you are allowed, you're in a prime location to be able to build a database quickly. If you think about, I don't know, but the Stena would have the stats. How many people go through the doors each day?
About 85,000 people a week are passing our shop.
Right, 85,000 people a week are passing the shop. So, now again, I'm way off topic now, but I want to add value. There's one thing that happens. If you pass the same shop over and over and it looks the same all the time, you know what happens is we form a scotoma. I don't know if you've heard of a scotoma before. Let me explain what a scotoma is. It's like a clinical definition. Us men, we're brilliant at forming scotomas. Let me explain. Renee, are you married?
Yes.
Okay. And Nathan, I know you're married. Ben, do you have a partner?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Now, this is what it looks like. Ready? And now this is for us men and ladies. You will understand the other side of this. Us men, we go to a cupboard in the kitchen and we say to our partners, honey, where's the salt? Or where's the sauce? Or where's whatever? And they say to us men, it's on the set. It's on the front. It's right at the front on the shelf. Second, it's right there. And then we look again and we say it's not there. And then they say it is, and we say it's not. Can everyone relate to this conversation so far?
Regularly.
Yeah.
Regularly, yep. And then what happens is I go, no, I put money on it. It's not there. And then my partner, my wife says, if I have to get up, you're in trouble. I say, I'll put money on it. It's not there. She gets up. She opens the fridge and says, what's this? It's right there. Now, I've got close to 20/20 vision, but for those 10 seconds, I can't see it. It's invisible. Here's what happens. When you see the same thing over and over and over and over again, your brain, it becomes invisible to. So when you say, I can't see the salt, your brain says, all right, I can't see the salt. So what's my point? When your office, and there is no competition, there is no engagement, and your office stays exactly the same all the time, the 85,000 people walking through the shops each day form a scotoma because they're so used to seeing the exact same thing that it becomes invisible to them. Does that make sense?
I think it does, and I think that's actually quite an interesting point that you raised, because we have a lot of people that do say to us, didn't know you were there, come to the centre every day, didn't know you were there. And we have always thought, how stupid are you then? Because surely you can see us. We've got a front window, a back window, we've got signs. So that's an interesting point. And maybe that next step from that is what you're probably about to go on to, is that we need to constantly be doing something that's different.
Yeah. So, but now, like, I'm talking about two different things, and I'm sort of breaking away a little bit. But thing number one, if I'm sitting in your shoes, and okay, you're paying for the privilege to be there, yeah? Like, it's not like you're getting, and I think you are getting a good deal on the rent, but there's cheaper places that you can get rent too. But my point is, if you're going to have that spot, then I would constantly running competitions or engagement campaigns out the front to capture leads constantly. Let's build on the foot traffic, and B, constantly be changing things up to get people's attention to say, look at me, because it's literally, it's not me saying a fancy word. If you went and Google scotoma, you will see exactly the clinical definition and how it applies to your business. So you consistently change it up where you're getting big foot traffic. I promise you'll do well out of it. Running different competitions, running different engagement strategies, building your database that way, I think is, for me, okay, I don't get 85,000 people a year come past my office, where you guys have it a week. So, I'd be looking at how to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Just on that, we've as part of our marketing strategy, we've set a competition every 2 months.
Yep.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, would it not get to the point where people just recognise us as the place that's always just asking for data?
Yeah, maybe too. And that's valid. But you know what? I've got to be honest. And you, from your point of view, you're saying asking for data, great. But let's just say they've got kids, and let's put another spin on it. They've got kids, and you're giving away really cool price. Like, realistically, let me. If I'm going to run a competition in where you guys are, I'm not even going to run it towards an adult. All I'm going to do is run it towards kids, because it's like Macca's do this very well. Like Macca's have a Happy Meal, and in the Happy Meal they have a toy. The kid doesn't want the food. The kid just wants the toy, and then the kid bugs the shit out of the parents until the parents buy them the meal to get the toy. It's almost the same thing. That that for you, you're saying, well, okay, we're the agent that collects the data, but for them, you're the agency that give stuff, give away stuff to the kids, and that's how they're probably going to perceive it more than. You're looking at it as a data collection tool. They're looking at it as, well, you're keeping our kids entertained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
engaged. So the answer is yes. You do anything long enough, and it's not going to work as well. Don't get me wrong. But I would certainly be looking at ways to constantly be giving that front of the office a new engagement strategy regularly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm well off topic and I'm over time. So let me just sort of drill down. But I'll talk about the front of our office. I'll talk about our office, and as I said, we got well sidetracked there. So for you guys, that should be a big talking point in your presentation. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I'll start talking about hope marketing. Hope marketing, and I say everything up until this point has been hope marketing. We put a sign on it, we put it in the internet, we put it in the magazine, and we hope. But here's how we do things differently, and we'll talk about Locked On. Each week, we're going to send out each week we're going to do an open house invite to invite people to your open house. And what we're also going to do is a buyer match email as well. So as we list a property, as we list your property, we're going to match up the buyers that suit. We're going to email them. What we're also going to do is a weekly email inviting them to your open house as well. So we just talk about our email engagement, but then this is what it looks like. We'll just take them through the steps. Now, okay, this is version 1. But you'll just update the slides and say, okay, this is what it looks like. We're going to email it out. We're going to see who opened your email. Then we're going to see who clicked on it. And then what's really important is what we're then going to do is invite them to your open house. We're going to jump on the phone, or we're going to SMS them and invite them to come and inspect your property. And the reason why this is strategic is because we leave nothing to chance. While all the other agents are hoping that a buyer comes to their property, we're targeting buyers that meet your property criteria. We're seeing who opened your email. We're seeing who clicked to view it online. And then the people that clicked to view it online, we're actually inviting them to your opens. So that's one of the things I shared to a seller. And you know what a lot of sellers will say? I didn't even know that you could do that. I'd say, yeah, while all the others are just sort of hoping and praying, we're sort of engaging. We just talk about, now here's the reality, right? We're sort of towards the home straight, and I'm going to sort of gallop through this last part. But I'll say to you, or I'll say to them, something like this. Now, okay, I'll ask this question, guys. What's the biggest complaint about real estate agents from a seller's point of view, or from a consumer's point of view in general? What's the number one complaint about our industry?
We never get back to people.
We don't hear from them.
Yeah, it's lack of communication in some form. So here's what I would like you guys to start doing, and you may already do it, but I'll check. Do you guys talk about, and this is what I say, I'll talk about the wording I'll use is your vendor communication blueprint, right? So my question I have is, in your listing presentation, do you explain to a seller what the communication feedback or the feedback communication strategy looks like?
Yes, I do.
You do, Nathan? Great. Anybody else?
I do, not in huge detail, but I sort of say to them, you'll hear from me on a Monday, you'll get some reports, we'll go through them. I have vendor meetings on a Wednesday. So a little bit, but nothing. It's not in mine.
Make it part of your presentation. This is how I open the dialogue. I'll say this to you. I'll say the number one complaint about real estate agents from sellers is, once they've got your business, the lack of communication. You don't know what's going on. So, and again, all I'm trying to do is point a difference. I'd say, so while the other agents might not be giving information, what we're going to do is something very simple. Each week, we're going to give you a written vendor report. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Second thing that's going to happen is you're going to hear from me a minimum of 4 times a week via phone. And I'll explain. You're going to hear from me after a Saturday open. You're going to hear from me Monday after callbacks. You're going to hear from me on a Wednesday for a midweek update. You're going to hear from me on a Friday. So worst case scenario, you're going to hear from me 4 times a week. Now, some of those calls might be 30 seconds long. I might, but they're always just going to be quick updates, and you're going to get a written report. And then I'll say something like this, because here's what I know. An informed seller can make an informed decision. So I always want to make sure that you're completely up to date and informed so you can make the right decisions. E.g., don't make bullhead decisions. I'm going to give you information so then you can make logical, rational decisions. So that's how I'm sort of spelling that out. Now, this is where we start to talk about pricing. Now, with pricing, I don't do anything revolutionary or anything different to you. And with pricing, all I'm doing is you've got your RP data printout or price finder printout, correct?
Yeah.
And so do I. So I've got my printout, you've got your printout. That's nice and easy. So this is now where I start talking about method of sale. You know, is it is it, you know, no price? Is it auction? Is it, you know, buyer range? Is it, you know, set asking price? So I start to see what they want. Then now I start to talk about price. And, you know, so I've got the RP data printout, and, you know, we price it too low, we give it away. We price it too high, and it sits forever. So this is where we're going through RP data, looking at comparable sales and trying to find a happy medium for where it should be. And then I'll sort of drill down as well. One of the dialogues that I use as far as listing presentation goes and pricing, I always use, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'll always use a book. So after we've delivered price, and if we're sort of, you know, like 5% apart or 10% apart, I'll say something like this. Look, right now, if we're a book, we're at least, you know, we're in the same book. We might not necessarily be on the same page, but we're at least in the same chapter. I always sort of have that analogy. If we're right on, you know, I say, you know, if we agree on price at the same level, I'll say, look, if we're a book, we're in the same book, we're in the same chapter, or even on the same page, and we're probably even in the same paragraph. So that's how I always sort of give the analogy to how close we are on price, or if we're miles apart. I'll say, look, we're in a library, and you're in the fictional section, and I'm in the factual section. And I'll sort of have a joke with them like that. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. But at this point, if they're 30% over the price, I probably don't want it anyway. So, but now this is probably the most important slide, or one of the most important slides on my presentation. And you think, why? It's only got a logo. And then this is where I'll actually talk about. This is where I'll talk about negotiation. And I'll say something like this to a seller. I say, look, Renee, most sellers will hire a real estate agent ever before they even know that real estate agent can negotiate for them. Because they just think, oh, well, the people around the corner listed with them, so maybe we should too. But here's what I know. It's not about how many homes we sell. It's about that we sell your home for more. That's key dialogue. It's not about how many we sell. It's about how much we get for yours. None of those other properties, really, you're not impacted by them. You're impacted by what we get for your house. And I'll talk about negotiation. And I'll actually do a role play with a seller. And I'll say to a seller right on the spot, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can I just take you through a quick scenario of how we negotiate on your behalf? And they sort of look at me a bit cross-eyed and a bit puzzled to say, well, I haven't experienced this before. And they say, sure. And I'll say, look, most real estate agents aren't actually negotiators. Most real estate agents are just really overpaid and really expensive couriers. Because what will happen is they will get an offer from the buyer, and they will bring it to you. They'll get a counter offer from you and take it to them, and they'll just go backwards and forwards. And I'd say, and if that's all the agent is going to do, then all they should do is invite you into the office, invite the buyer into the office, go and make you tea and coffee, and see what the end result is, because that's what most agents ultimately do, are just overpaid couriers. How we do things is completely different. And I'll explain the actual negotiation process. I'll say to them, you know, we actually negotiate. So as soon as a buyer makes an offer, the first thing I'm going to say to them is, congratulations. That's the first part of my negotiation. I'll always congratulate somebody on making an offer. I will never thank them. I'll explain to a seller why the difference between thank and congratulate. I'll say, look, most agents, as soon as they get an offer, they're going to say thank you, which will automatically imply that the buyer has just done you, as the seller, a favour of making an offer. I'm not going to say thank you. I'm going to say congratulations, you've made a wise choice, which means that the buyer has made a wise choice in buying your house. Does that make sense, by the way, what I just said?
Yeah.
So that's step one. I'll say that's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that is a great starting offer. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to stand my ground for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, because here's what I know. At the initial offer, a sale is being made. And what I mean by this is a buyer is selling the agent on who's in charge, or the agent is selling the buyer on who's in charge. And the agent that just gets the offer and then runs to you as the vendor establishes that the buyer is in charge at this point. So I want to make sure for the buyer to know that I'm in the lead here. And this is what I'm going to say. Congratulations. That's a great starting offer. If that offer wasn't to be accepted, what would be your next best offer? And I'm going to establish that I'm in charge straight away. And I know that 9 out of 10 buyers are going to turn around and say to me, but can you just see what the vendor has to say first? And this is the moment of truth, because again, most agents are going to say, sure, I will. But again, the buyer is selling the agent on why they should pay less. Me, as a negotiator, is going to stand my ground on your behalf and explain why we should get more. And I'm just going to say, look, I can talk to the vendor about that price that you've already discussed, but here's the thing. It has already been tested at that price level and is unlikely to be accepted and has already been rejected. That's why I was asking what your next best offer would be. So, and I'll explain, when you can get an increase of offer early on, it makes it easier to bridge the gap at the end. So 3 steps. I'll always say about congratulations. That's a great starting offer. If that offer wasn't to be accepted, what would be your next best offer? At that price point, it has already been accepted and unlikely to be, it's already been presented and has been rejected and unlikely to be accepted again. What would be your next best offer? Now, I'll say there's one other thing that we do in a negotiation initially to stand your ground. I deal with a lot of different, a lot of investors. That is a non-emotional transaction for them. And I'll say, and also we're dealing with different nationalities that aren't backwards and coming forwards and are very strong negotiators. And I'll say, for an investor who's a very strong negotiator, I need to let them know that I'm in charge. So I'm going to say something like this. Congratulations, that's a great starting offer. If that wasn't to be accepted, what would be your next best offer? And then they're going to say, take it to the owner for me. And I'm just going to say this, look, I can take it to the owner on your behalf, but I've got a really good relationship with that owner, and we're going to sit together tonight at their lounge room, and I'm going to present your offer. They're going to look me dead in the eyes and they're going to say, what do I think? And I'm going to advise that seller not to take your offer because I believe the property is worth more money, and the price that you've offered is actually below our expectation of sale price. So right now, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the seller isn't the one that's rejecting the offer. It's me, and I really want to help you buy the property. That's why I was asking what would be your next best offer. Now, these are some dialogues that I sort of go through, A, when I'm negotiating, but B, when I'm actually doing a listing presentation. Because at the end of that, okay, and again, we're going way longer than what it normally takes. But at the end of that, what do they automatically think?
You've got to pay more.
We've got to pay more, but also the vendor thinks I've got the right person in my corner. Okay, I've actually got somebody that can negotiate. Not because I told them I can negotiate, because I've just demonstrated that I can. And then some of the final slides, and we'll finish this up for today. And then now this is probably my favorite slide in the whole listing presentation. I'll just talk about 3 outcomes. I've been talking about this for years. I've been using this slide since 2010, and it's had probably the biggest impact on positioning or getting the right price on a property. And this is what it looks like. I'll say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's 3 outcomes any property can fall into. If we're getting, let me start that again. So we've spoken about price, we've spoken about strategy, and then we've spoken about how we negotiate. And then I'll just say this. Here's the great thing, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I've got an opinion of what I think your property's worth, and you've got an opinion of what you think your property's worth. But ultimately, we will know if we're on track or off track, not based on my opinion or based on what you want, but based on buyer activity in a couple of weeks' time. Because here's what it looks like. If we're getting no inspections and no offers, it doesn't mean people haven't seen the property. It just means that they've chosen not to inspect it. Does that make sense? Like, these are the dialogue. There's a difference between seen and inspected. And I'll say this, I'll say, here's the difference. When we put your property on the market, we put it in the magazine, we put it in the paper, we put a signboard on it, we email it out, we put it on the internet, and we're not getting any inspections, it means that people have seen the property, they've chosen not to inspect it. And there's a message in that silence. Because what that tells us is they've seen it, but it didn't make the shopping list to be one of the top 20. And what I mean by that is, they've seen it on the net, but have chosen not to inspect. And typically that tells me we're 10% over where we need to be. If we're getting some inspections, but no offers, what that means is they've seen it on the net, it's made the top 20, but it hasn't made the top 3. So what that realistically means is we're actually at this point helping other agents and other sellers sell their properties, because they're looking at yours, comparing yours to theirs. The others are looking like better value, and they're making offers. So if we're getting some inspections and no offers, it means we're close, but it typically means we might be 5% over. But if we're getting multiple inspections and multiple offers, what this means is they've seen it on the net, it's made the top 20, and it's made the top 10. So within 2 weeks' time, what I would like to do is review the marketing strategy, review the campaign, and see exactly where your property fits in. Now, here's the reality. Ready? In 2 weeks' time, if it's priced right, what's happened to it already?
Sold.
So in 2 weeks' time, if it's in category 3, it's already sold. It's done. It's a wrap. If it's category 1 or 2, so what I'm trying to do in this slide and this dialogue is I'm trying to set up my first price adjustment before I ever have to meet them the next time. And I'm trying to explain that this is part of the process that we go through. Does that make sense? Because what happens is most agents never talk about this at all. 2 or 3 weeks' time, we talk about trying to get a price adjustment. And then all of a sudden it all doesn't work because the vendor says, oh, but no one's come through yet, it's all too soon. So I use this now, especially in the market that we're currently in. If you're going to do nothing from today and just go, I'm going to ignore everything Aaron said, please just don't ignore this, just do this one slide. At the end of your presentation, after you got the ABO, when you get the agency agreement, just go through this. So I promise you, this will set up your price adjustment strategy in 2 weeks' time. No inspections, no offers, 10% over. Some inspections, no offers, 5% over. Multiple inspections, multiple offers, we're on the money. That's how we do it. Right, so we'll set up the first price. I say, so look, Nathan, in 2 weeks' time, let's get back and review the strategy and the campaign and see exactly what category we fit into, and we can see what happens. Then we talk about finding the best buyer for your property. Then we talk about you get your best offers early. Everybody does this, yeah?
Yeah.
We get our best offers early on. And we talk about, premium buyer. They come in the first couple of weeks. And this is what I'll talk about. Ready? This is how I sort of sell it. And because we've all heard of first offer syndrome, true? Where the seller rejects the first offer, then ends up selling for the same amount or less down the track.
Yep.
So this is where I want to get them ready for first offer syndrome. I'll say, look, there's a thing called first offer syndrome. And they go, what do you mean? I'd say it's a thing where we get really good offers at the beginning of the campaign, only that they get rejected, and then the seller sells for less in the future. And I say, I want to explain what first offer syndrome is so it doesn't happen to you. And I'll say, look, you're going to get your best offers early, and I'll explain why. Right now, there could be 50 to 100 people that are looking for a property like yours. And they've seen every property that's been on the market. And when your property comes on the market, yours is the new property, and then they all go to it. But what happens after the first 3 or 4 weeks, that now your property, all those buyers in the market have now seen it. Now what happens is now you have to wait for new buyers to enter the market and then for them to drip feed to come to you. So what's going to happen? In the first couple of weeks, these are the key words, ready? We are going to hypermarket your property. We're going to advertise it online. magazine, internet, newspaper, signboards, letterbox drops, email. We're going to hypermarket it. So it doesn't matter if the buyer is a passive buyer or a proactive buyer, they're going to see it. It doesn't matter if they're looking at hope advertising or strategic advertising, they're going to see it. So the goal is to create as much demand and as much competition over the first few weeks as possible, because what happens after that is people start to think, why hasn't it sold and what's wrong with it? So I just want to let you know that you get your best offers early. So that's roughly what I'll say there. And that's the last slide. I'll just say, look, when we price the property correctly, here's what happens. You get more competition, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I sort of just go through the benefits of pricing their house correctly. So any questions, guys? Because that's about an hour and 40 minutes. But in reality, that's closer to 50 minutes when I'm actually doing that in its entirety. So any questions about that? And then the last one, the last slide, realistically is just me asking for their paperwork. You know, are you ready to get started? Can I have permission to start telling buyers about your property? Are you ready to put me to work? You know, all the standard closes that we all should be using. So I guess my question is, or I guess, okay, after you've seen this and I've taken you through it, do you have any questions about what I've shown you?
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna give you the video so you can hear it, play it back, listen to the dialogue. And the second thing I'm gonna do is actually give you the PowerPoint presentation so you can edit it, modify it, and manipulate it.
Perfect.
So here's what I would suggest moving forward. If I'm sitting in your shoes right now, I would say, right, let's get the slides from Aaron. Right, once you've got the slides, then go and modify it to suit you. Then once you've got it modified, then I'll just listen to the video a few times, you know, pick and choose the spots and play it over and over. So, okay, and I'll ask this part. Is there some things in my presentation that I've shared with you and some of the things I've said that you can use as part of your presentation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, before we finish up, let me share this with you. There's only one way that I've got. I won't say I've got good at doing this presentation, but I've got comfortable with it, and that's just by practice. So, and this is more now pitched at you, Ben. Okay, so you've been going out with Leanne. Has there been some things in my presentation that you can pick up that you can now use?
Yeah, there is. I like the formality of it, because what I see the issue with Leanne is that when we go in together, she has her style and I'm learning to adapt my style to her style, where I think...
Which is the wrong style, I think, because it's...
Well, I think I'd be a lot more confident doing it off having a plan rather than going in and sort of just getting a feel for it, because obviously I don't have the experience to get a feel for it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because there's some agents on this planet that just have the X factor and they can wing it, right? They can wing it. People like them. And I said to you on Monday, Leanne, I said, look, you know, you win a lot of listings because people like you. You've got a good energy. And that's part of it. And that's a big percentage of success in real estate, is people buying into your energy. But the second part of it is having structure and process. And let me explain. People, you might say to me, Aaron, why do you need a listing presentation? Well, the listing presentation isn't for me. The listing presentation is for the consumer. Let me explain. Some people learn by hearing, some people learn by seeing. So why wouldn't I give myself the best chance of possibility of succeeding by doing both? Instead of me just talking to you and you learning by hearing, why don't I go through a structured presentation and you can also see it? So now some people will see it and relate to it, some people will hear. I'm just giving myself a bigger chance of succeeding using both, not just one or the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, like the way, look, I'm a very visual person. So if I can see something, that really benefits me. Where some other people are more auditory. They hear it and they can remember it. Why don't you just do both so you cover both bases? So
another question that goes back to the proactive versus passive part of their presentation.
Yeah.
So something that we've noticed, and it seems to be a trend that's happening in our area, is everyone's withdrawing from the magazines and the newspaper just based on expense, I assume, but also the fact that that we're not seeing the results come of this. Like, for example, our real estate magazine used to be 20 pages long. I think there was 4 pages of actual real estate ads in it this time. Like, for example, so it's a large scale withdrawal of these agencies. These are big agencies as well withdrawing their pages. So is there another way that you could suggest sort of attracting passive buyers other than this sort of way? Or is it sort of, we're going to have to stick with it still?
Look, 2 things, right? So, and when you're talking about, and this is a good thing for you. Let me explain that. Like, it's always the same. You zig when others zag. That's just the way life is. If you want to stand out, you don't do what everybody else does. And let me explain. So you can say to a seller right now, look, the other agents are withdrawing from the magazine in droves, and went from 20 or 25, whatever you said down before, because they're all focused on the proactive buyer. And I understand that that's the bulk of the market, but I think it's naive to eliminate a passive buyer that, typically passive buyers hold the records for paying the most money. I don't want to be here in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time presenting you an offer, and you ask me, is that the best we can get? I won't be able to look you in the eyes and say that is the absolute most amount of money if we don't explore all avenues. Like, what's the worst that happens? We might spend $1,000 too much. Let's treat it like insurance. Like, you wouldn't drive your car uninsured. Like, you wouldn't under advertise your property. The advertising is the insurance policy to make sure we get you the best price. The worst thing that happens is we spend $1,000 too much. The worst thing that happens is if we don't do it, we sell your property short by $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. I don't feel comfortable excluding passive buyers from your marketing campaign. I want to have the proactive buyers, and I also want the passive buyers. So in 3 weeks' time, when you ask me, what do I think? I can look you dead in the eyes and say, I've got you everything I can possibly give you, because I have no stone unturned. I have the passive buyers, I have the proactive buyers, and I've done everything in my power, and then I can say this is the best offer in the marketplace. If I don't do that other stuff, I won't be able to say to you that we have the best offer in the marketplace. I'll say this is the best offer that I've been able to find.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make, so what I'm trying to get at is, yes, if the others aren't doing it, that's a better thing for you, because it's a point of difference that other agents aren't doing, because they're just looking for a proactive buyer. We're looking for proactive and passive.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to we're going to have to push in on our VPA more, because the cost of it's still rising at the moment. I guess, well, not in the last few weeks, because they've been offering half pages for free and stuff because of the withdrawal.
Yeah.
But I guess it's coming down to the point where if people insist on, if we're insisting on putting people into the magazine, they're going to have to pay for it up front. Yep. That's the biggest expense in this office. Oh, no.
Realestate.com is our biggest expense. Like, realestate.com is outrageously expensive, as it is probably. I don't know what a listing in your area is, but
$1,500 for a highlight.
$1,500 for a highlight.
Yeah.
Well, we're actually not even as expensive as you, but we're still expensive.
Yeah. For Premiere, it's $3,000, $2,997.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not quite as expensive as you, but
yeah, they do it on demand. Obviously, like they work it out on, once upon a time it used to be a flat rate.
Yeah.
And now it's on demand, and also the more agents that use it, they jam it up more as well. So they're very clever now. But regardless, the paper versus not doing it is just a big point of difference, where you can just talk about passive versus proactive, and you can just say, look, I don't feel comfortable excluding percentage of your market. Regardless if it's big ad in the paper or whatever. And I understand your question. What other things can we do to find the passive buyers? Also, the paper and the magazine is also about building your profile as well, not just about selling the property.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of both.
And that's actually how we've probably sold. It's an interesting twist that you've put on it now, with the way that you're wording it with passive buyers. We've sold against it if we have difficulty getting VPA out of them, and we know that the VPA that we're going to get is only really going to cover, you know, realestate.com, domain, photos, all that, the real core things that we must have.
You must have, yeah.
Yeah, we've actually probably sold against the paper based on that most agents are only using that as a form of self-promotion, looking for their next listing. It's not really where someone's looking to buy your property. So to try and get us out of having to probably, you know, get that expense in without them having enough money in their coffers to cover it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and look, I'm not going to say, oh, you've got to do this or you've got to do that. But if you are going to get the magazine, and realistically now, it's actually, if everybody else is doing it, then it doesn't have as much impact. But if there's less people doing it, then you actually want to do it. You know, it's that whole red water versus blue water thing. You know, red water is when everybody does it, it's a competitive market. Blue water is when you're one of only a few people that's going to give you more opportunity. So now is the time when nobody's doing it is the time to actually do it.
True. Well, yeah, I mean,
Especially
it gives us a chance to stand out, I suppose. Whereas
it does. That's my whole point. That's like if 20 other agents were doing it, you say, don't worry about it. It's because you can't stand out. But now, when nobody's doing it, well, you do it because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah.
That would be the only thing.
Okay.
Good with that?
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, guys. That was a big session, actually. That was huge.
It was. But there's a lot of good stuff in there for us to work with. And I think probably our commitment back to you now is that we'll all get this. So will you email that to me, or you'll email that individually to each person? Or
No, I think I'll email it to you, Leanne. I'll email it to you, and you can sort of send it round. So I'm going to just email two things. I'm going to upload this video file to YouTube. And I'll just put it on like a silent listing, so only you guys have access to it.
Yep.
So you then can watch the replay of the video.
Yes.
And then you'll have this, as I said, the PowerPoint slide. And so I guess the commitment component is, this is it, ready? Edit, modify this to suit yourself, to suit your office. Send it over to me once you finish, so I can have a look at it.
Yep.
And then listen to the videos, or the audio and the video of it to practice what to say on each page.
Yeah, I think that we might make a commitment that we will do some role play on that inside our office, so that, you know, because I think that's probably the really important factor, is that we all get a little bit more comfortable with using some of the things which I think were really good that just came up in that we don't use. So,
okay, let's do that. Let's check in, and I'll give you a call next week, Leanne, see how it's all progressing.
Yeah.
If you've got any questions, guys, before now and then, give me a buzz. And again, just make sure that email link I sent you, Leanne, for Jigglar, just click it to link our account so you're in my team.
Yes, I'll do that. As soon as we get out of this meeting, I'll click on that one and get that rolling.
Done. All right, guys, have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron.
Take care.
We'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.